Imagine this, you take $20,000 out of the wrong retirement account for a trip with your grandchildren, and the government treats it like you earn far more than that. Your tax bill rises, more of your Social Security becomes taxable, your Medicare premiums can move in the wrong direction, and what looked like a simple withdrawal turns into a chain reaction that keeps costing you money long after the vacation photos are put away. That is not a small mistake. That is a retirement income mistake. And I have found that many people who save diligently for decades still walk straight into it because they were taught how to build the pile, but never taught how to take the pile back out. Once your paycheck stops, your need for income does not stop. It simply changes form. You are no longer living off a salary from an employer. You are creating your own paycheck. And the order you use to pull money from your accounts can matter more than most people realize. In some cases, it can matter more than the investments you own inside those accounts. That is the part many people miss. They spend 30 or 40 years asking how to grow the money, and then almost no time asking how to remove it with precision. They assume retirement is about having enough. I think retirement is also about having control. If you do not control the sequence, the tax code starts controlling your sequence for you. So let me walk you through this the way I would explain it to a family sitting across a table from me. I want to show you what replaces the paycheck, where the real tax traps are buried, why some withdrawal dollars are far more dangerous than others, what order usually makes the most sense, and how a couple can end up with materially more after-tax spending power simply by changing which account they touch first. Before we get to the order, we need to get clear about the buckets. Most retirees above 55 have some version of the same handful of income sources. They may have Social Security, they may have a pension or an annuity, they may have a traditional IRA, a 401k, or both. They may have a taxable brokerage account with stocks, funds, cash, or bonds. And if they planned well, they may also have a Roth IRA or Roth 401k. The fixed sources are simple enough. Social Security, pensions, annuities, they show up on schedule. Markets can be nervous, politicians can be noisy. The deposit still arrives. But the rest of the picture is under your control. Taxable brokerage. Traditional retirement accounts, Roth money, cash reserves, those are the faucets you open and close. And the reason the order matters is that the tax treatment of each faucet is different. If you ignore that and just pull from the largest account, or the account that feels easiest, or the one your neighbor said he used first, you can quietly give away a surprising amount of money, not because you made a bad investment, because you made a bad withdrawal decision. That is why I want you to stop thinking like an accumulator for a moment and start thinking like a retirement income architect. If I were drawing this on a yellow legal pad, I would start with one simple sentence. Retirement is not one pool of money. It is multiple tax buckets pretending to be one pool of money. And if you do not separate them mentally, you will almost certainly make a poorer decision than you need to. Now let me show you the 3 tax landmines that make this subject so important. The first one is what many people call the Social Security tax torpedo. A lot of retirees assume Social Security is either taxable or not taxable in a clean, simple way. It is not at the federal level. How much of your Social Security becomes taxable depends on your combined income. That includes adjusted gross income, tax-free interest, and half of your Social Security benefits. The thresholds that determine whether 0%, 50%, or up to 85% of your benefits become taxable have been sitting there for decades without inflation adjustment. That means more retirees get dragged into this every year. So a withdrawal that looks harmless on the surface can do more damage than expected. You pull a little more from a traditional IRA that raises ordinary income that can also cause more of your Social Security to become taxable. Suddenly, that extra withdrawal is not just one taxable move. It creates a second layer of tax pain. That is why some retirees feel as if a small withdrawal caused their effective tax rate to jump far more than the bracket chart suggested. The second landmine is Medicare or MA, the income-related monthly adjustment amount. This is one of those wonderful government systems that sounds boring until it reaches into your wallet. If your modified adjusted gross income rises above certain thresholds, your Medicare Part B and Part D premiums rise in steps. And the part that irritates me is that these steps do not care whether you cross the line by $1 or $50,000, cross the threshold, and you can pay materially more. It is a perfect example of why retirement planning is not just about investment returns. It is about avoiding expensive cliffs. Worse, Irma looks back 2 years. So a decision you make today can surprise you later when you thought the decision was already behind you. That big Roth conversion, that oversized IRA withdrawal, that one-time tax event. It can come back in the form of higher Medicare costs after the fact. The third landmine is the required minimum distribution. Many people are relaxed in their early retirement years because they have flexibility. They can decide not to touch the IRA, they can wait, they can postpone, but later the IRS stops asking politely. Once RMDs begin, you are required to pull money out of traditional retirement accounts whether you need the income or not. Those withdrawals are taxed as ordinary income. If the pre-tax pile is still large, the forced withdrawal can be large too. And once that happens, the tax torpedo and IRMA can start working against you at the same time. That is the real danger. These landmines do not always arrive alone. They can stack on top of each other. A large RMD can raise taxable income, make more Social Security taxable, and push Medicare premiums higher. A person who spent years trying to avoid taxes by touching nothing may discover they merely postponed the problem until it became much harder to manage. That is why I want you to understand something important. A zero-tax year is not always a smart year. Sometimes it is simply a year when you failed to use your low brackets while they were available. Now let us translate the buckets into plain English. A taxable brokerage account is not tax-free, but it is often gentler than people think. When you sell appreciated investments there, you are usually taxed on the gain, not the full withdrawal amount, and long-term capital gains often receive better tax treatment than salary-type income. In the right circumstances, with low enough ordinary income, some gains can fall into the 0% long-term capital gains range. That is not an accident. That is a tool. A traditional IRA or 401k is different. Every dollar that comes out is generally treated like ordinary income, not capital gains, not some special retirement category ordinary income. It behaves much more like a paycheck than many people realize. That is why pulling from this bucket carelessly can create trouble so quickly. A Roth account is the most flexible bucket of the three if the withdrawal is qualified. That money can come out tax-free. It generally does not show up in the same harmful way for Social Security taxation calculations. It generally does not push you toward IRMA the same way a traditional IRA dollar can. In practical terms, that makes Roth money tremendously valuable, especially later in retirement when other parts of the tax system are already pressing in on you. So here's the question I want you to ask every time you think about taking money out in retirement. Not where do I have money, not which account is biggest, not which account have I not touched in a while. Ask this instead: which dollar does the least damage when I pull it out? That is a much smarter question because in retirement, $2 can buy the same dinner and produce very different tax consequences. Now let me give you the withdrawal order that usually wins, or at least usually gets people much closer to the right answer. I say usually because no honest person should tell you there is one perfect universal formula. State taxes matter, health matters, marital status matters, legacy goals matter, age differences between spouses matter, but there is still a general order that tends to make a great deal of sense for people with multiple account types. In many cases, the first bucket to lean on is taxable brokerage and cash used intelligently. After that, controlled withdrawals from traditional retirement accounts and controlled Roth conversions often make sense, usually up to a target tax bracket you are deliberately choosing. Then, if your circumstances allow it, delaying Social Security can be extremely powerful, particularly for the higher earner in a married household. And the Roth is often the account you protect for later, for flexibility, for emergencies, for one-time expenses, and often for heirs. That sounds simple when stated quickly, but the real power is in why that order works. Think about the years roughly between age 60 and 70. I regard those years as one of the most valuable planning windows in retirement. Your paycheck may have stopped or dropped. Social Security may not have started yet, or not fully. Required minimum distributions have not yet begun. And if you are early in that window, you may have time before Medicare premium cliffs become a problem. In other words, your taxable income can be lower than it is likely to be later. That is exactly when many people should be doing the opposite of what instinct tells them to do. Their instinct says, do not touch the IRA, let it grow. Avoid taxes for now. My view is that this can be a very expensive instinct if you are sitting in a low tax bracket in your 60s and you choose to do nothing with that pre-tax money. You may simply be saving it for a future year when it comes out at worse tax rates with less flexibility, while also causing more Social Security taxation and higher Medicare premiums. That is not tax avoidance. That is tax deferral without strategy. A better pattern often looks like this. Use taxable brokerage assets and cash reserves to cover a meaningful share of living expenses. Realize gains carefully, watch what portion is actual gain and what portion is basis. Then add enough IRA withdrawals or Roth conversions to intentionally fill up a low bracket. Maybe that is the 12% bracket. Maybe it is a controlled amount into the 22% bracket if the longer-term math supports it. But do it on purpose. Do not drift into it. Design it. The point is not to pay the least tax this year. The point is to pay less tax over your lifetime. That is one of the central ideas in intelligent retirement income planning. Lifetime tax management is more important than winning one calendar year. Let me make this more concrete with an example. Suppose I am looking at a couple like Tom and Linda. They are in their late 60s. They are retired. They want about $90,000 a year after tax to live the life they want. They have no pension. If they both turn on Social Security immediately, the household benefit is meaningful, but the higher earner could lock in a much stronger benefit by waiting. They have roughly $500,000 in a taxable brokerage account, $700,000 in traditional retirement accounts, and $300,000 in Roth money. They are healthy and they expect a fairly long retirement. They also like the idea of leaving something behind. Most people looking at that household ask a lazy question first. Which account should they spend down? That is the wrong question. The right question is what sequence best supports spending today while reducing future tax friction. In the early phase before full Social Security is turned on, they have a remarkable opportunity. They can use the taxable account to generate spending money. If managed carefully, a portion of what they withdraw may simply be return of basis, and a portion may be long-term capital gain. Depending on total income, some of those gains may be taxed very favorably. At the same time, because their ordinary income is relatively low, they can take controlled withdrawals from the traditional IRA or perform measured Roth conversions. They are not doing this because they need every one of those IRA dollars today. They are doing it because the years are cheap. The tax brackets are relatively friendly compared with what later years may look like. So each year, instead of saying, let us avoid taxes altogether, they say, let us use this low-income year. Well, let us move some money out of the future RMD machine and into the Roth, while the cost of doing so is manageable. That is the kind of sentence that can save a household a great deal of money. Then later, when Social Security begins at a higher level, the situation changes. Now fixed income is doing more of the work. Good, that is what we want. But now every extra dollar of ERA income can be more dangerous because the Social Security thresholds are in play. This is where the withdrawal order often shifts. First, if required minimum distributions have started, they must be taken. There is no debate there. Second, if additional spending is needed beyond Social Security and the RMD, taxable brokerage assets often become the next place to fill the gap with an eye on capital gains treatment. Third, Roth funds remain the most valuable safety valve. If a roof needs replacing, a car dies, a grandchild needs help with college, or a one-time expense appears, Roth money can be the cleanest source because it does not necessarily create the same tax collateral damage. Notice what happened: same family, same accounts, different ages, different withdrawal order. That is why I tell people retirement income is dynamic. It is not a one-time rule you set at 62 and never revisit. The right order in your early 60s may not be the right order in your late 70s. Your job is not to memorize one slogan. Your job is to understand the logic deeply enough to adapt. And when you do that, something else becomes obvious. The Roth is not just another account, it is optionality. I like optionality in investing, in business, in life. The more options you preserve at the moment when the world becomes less cooperative, the better your odds of making a rational decision. A Roth account gives you options because it gives you a source of spending that does not necessarily light up the tax system the way other withdrawals do. That is why many people are far too casual with Roth money early in retirement. They spend it simply because it feels painless. I would rather preserve it unless I have a very good reason not to. Keep it growing, keep it ready. Let it be the bucket you can tap when every other bucket has strings attached. Now let me give you a few rules of thumb that are worth remembering. Do not empty one bucket completely before touching the next. That is what amateurs do. They drain taxable first for years, then move to IRA, then finally touch Roth. It looks tidy on paper. It is often terrible in practice. Retirement planning is not neat. It is blended. Use the years in your 60s to shrink future RMD problems while you still have room to maneuver. If your bracket is low now and likely to be higher later, waiting can be the expensive move. Know your Social Security taxation thresholds. You do not need to become a tax attorney. But you do need to know when an extra withdrawal may start causing more of your benefit to become taxable. Ignorance here can be costly. Understand that Roth conversions are often on sale before later life income pressures stack up. There is a period in many retirements when the tax environment is as favorable as it is likely to be. Waste that period. And you may not get it back. Protect the Roth as a strategic reserve. Use it intentionally, not casually. And perhaps most importantly, stop thinking that the government only taxes what you pull. Sometimes it taxes what that pull causes elsewhere. That one idea can change the way a retiree looks at every withdrawal, if you want a practical rhythm for this. Here's how I would do the review each year. Sit down, preferably before the year gets away from you. List the fixed income you expect: Social Security, pension, annuity, rental income, part-time work, whatever is dependable enough to count. Then decide what you actually want to spend. Not the fantasy number, not the number that makes you feel disciplined. The real number. Include travel. If you are going to travel, include family gifts if you know you like giving them. Include the house project if you know it is likely coming. Next, calculate the gap between fixed income and desired spending. That gap is what your portfolio needs to provide. Then decide what tax bracket you are willing to fill. That decision alone can create an enormous amount of discipline. Instead of wandering through the year reacting emotionally, you are saying in advance, this is the bracket I want to use. Then you fill the gap in a deliberate way. Some years that means enough traditional IRA withdrawal or Roth conversion to fully use the bracket you chose. Some years it means taking the rest from the taxable account. Some years it means using Roth money to avoid a bad threshold. The point is not that every year looks the same. The point is that every year is evaluated on purpose. And if something large changes mid-year, revisit the plan. A property sale, an inheritance, a major medical expense, a business sale, a capital gain you were not expecting. Retirement does not reward rigidity. It rewards calm adjustment. Once you do this a few years in a row, it stops feeling complicated. It starts feeling like a system. And systems are what reduce mistakes. I want to say one more thing here because it matters. A lot of retirees become obsessed with not paying tax today. I understand the instinct. Nobody enjoys writing checks to the government. But I have seen the opposite mistake too many times. People become so afraid of taxes now that they create an even bigger tax problem later. They preserve the pre-tax account untouched, let it swell, turn on Social Security, age into Medicare, and then act surprised when the system squeezes them from three directions at once. That surprise is avoidable. The phrase I want you to remember is tax smoothing, not tax elimination. Tax smoothing. The intelligent retiree tries to spread taxable income across years in a way that prevents extreme spikes later. That means taking some income voluntarily when it is cheap. It means not preserving every tax deferred dollar as if it were sacred. It means using the 60s as a design window rather than a holding pattern. That is the heart of this subject. By the time many people realize the order matters, they are already in the less flexible years. Social Security is running. RMDs are arriving. Medicare is watching income. The best planning years are behind them. I do not want that for you. I want you to think about retirement withdrawals the same way I think about capital allocation in a business. Every dollar should have a job, and the route that dollar takes matters. Two companies can have the same earnings and end up with different shareholder outcomes because of capital allocation. Two retirees can have the same portfolio value and end up with very different after-tax lifestyles because of withdrawal allocation. That is not theory, that is arithmetic. And if you are married, I want you to think as a household, not as two isolated claimants living under the same roof. Timing decisions, Social Security decisions, survivor considerations, tax brackets, Medicare thresholds, legacy goals, all of it interacts. Retirement is not two spreadsheets. It is one balance sheet with two lives attached to it. So let me bring this home with the plainest warning I can give you. The costly mistake in retirement is not only running out of money, it is letting unnecessary taxes quietly drain spending power year after year because you never learn the right order. You work too hard to build these accounts to hand away flexibility out of habit if you are already retired or within a few years of it. I want you to look at your accounts tonight and stop seeing one big pile, see the buckets, see the tax character of each one, see the threshold sitting in the background, see the years between now and forced withdrawals as an opportunity, not dead time. And ask yourself one serious question. If I need the next dollar of retirement income, which account gives it to me with the least collateral damage to taxes, Social Security, Medicare, and future flexibility? That is the question, not the easiest dollar, not the most familiar dollar, the least destructive dollar. Once you start asking that question every year, retirement planning changes, you stop reacting, you start designing, and when you start designing, you give yourself a much better chance of keeping more of what you spent a lifetime earning. That is the real objective, not just to retire intelligently, because the right withdrawal order does not simply lower a tax bill. It buys freedom, it preserves options, it reduces friction. It turns your savings into a cleaner paycheck, and it gives you a retirement that feels more stable, more intentional, and far less exposed to nasty surprises. That is a result worth working for. And if you have done the hard part already, if you built the savings, then do not fumble the final phase by treating every withdrawal dollar as if it were the same. It is not the same. It never was. The order matters. In many cases, it matters a great deal more than people think. And if you get that order right, you do not just keep more money, you keep more control. That is what most people are really after in retirement, whether they know how to say it or not. So be careful, be deliberate. Use the good years well, protect optionality, and never let a lazy withdrawal decision create a lifetime tax problem that better thinking could have avoided.